Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera. Got a pretty quick episode for you guys today. We have the finale-ish of like the mid-season point for the WNBA season. We have the WNBA All-Star Game coming up, and then obviously the Olympics. And we have the NBA Summer League kind of about like 3/4 of the way done. We're almost at that semifinal matchups where you have four teams playing for a title. So we're going to dive into a little bit of that and just some of our best bets, how we're going to be attacking this, how we're going to be attacking the rest of the summer, and how to get some of the best access and some of the best ways to bet these markets moving forward with kind of like a slower time during the summer right now. But first I want to start with the WNBA, and this is a really small slate, only two games. One player that I did absolutely want to take is I'm looking at Caitlin Clark. I know that she's not playing on the Olympic team, and she is going to be playing in the WNBA All-Star game. She was voted for that. Congrats to her, obviously. And she's been really playing some excellent basketball of late. And the reason I wanted to target this game in particular is it's a game against the Dallas Wings. I'm sorry, the Dallas Wings. The Dallas Stars is a hockey, right? And part of why I wanted to attack this game is when we look at Dallas plays at the third fastest pace in the WNBA, and they have the worst defensive rating out of every team in the W. Even from a rebounding perspective, they're a decent rebounding team. However, I do think this is going to be a great opportunity for Caitlin to really get out, and attack this Dallas Wings team in a variety of different ways. One of the angles that I like for her is I like her PRA. It's 35.5. She's hit this in 6 of her last 10 games, and she's kind of gotten into a little bit more of a stride. So I like the 35.5 PRA. That's at DraftKings right now and FanDuel as well. You get this about minus 115 juice. This is on at ESPN at 36.5, PrizePicks at 36.5. I do have some comments about PrizePicks that I thought was interesting, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But look, part of it, this is really a bet about the fact that this is the finale before like the end, like before they take their break, where the W takes a break for the Olympics, kind of get everything in order there. So I do think this is a great opportunity to bet on Caitlin to really show out in this game. And it's a good opportunity to buy low after she just had a 26 PRA outing against the Minnesota Lynx, who are one of the best defensive teams in the league. They play a little bit slower. This is a great opportunity for her. So I like her to go over 35.5 PRA. I like, if you want, I don't mind 15.5 RA if you want to do that. And I also bet triple double at 14-1 at Bet365. I think that's got bet down a little bit since I logged it in the Action app, but it's definitely a play where, for me, I think this is a good opportunity for her to kind of get out there, get some run in, and there's not the same level of concern where people are going to say like, oh well, like let's rest her. Like she's going to get plenty of rest, she's going to be out there, she's going to want to play. So I could see her maybe even playing some extended minutes just because it is going to be this last game before like a relatively long break for her. Probably her longest break from, organized basketball in a way that she's had in quite some time, given the fact that she really came directly from college, played deep in the tournament, right to training camp, right to the start of the season. So I like Caitlin Clark in this spot. It's tough for me to get away from her. And on the same side, or, in the same game, even Arike, she also could probably have a pretty good game. This line is a little bit like low for her, but she's also struggled of late. 22.5 points. She's kind of found it a little bit. She's had a little bit of difficulty recently, even though she's playing a ton of minutes. She's playing like almost 38 minutes per game. She's really kind of struggled to get into the paint, and I think that this is an opportunity for her to really get out and score against an Indiana Fever team who, even though they've played a bit better, they have the second worst defensive rating in the W. So I think this is a great opportunity for offense. I think this is a great opportunity for some overs in a game that I think is going to be actually really fun, really exciting to watch. And I think it should be, a pretty good game to tune into. And it's the final game really before the end of the season, or before the end of the first half of the season for the W. And the total is 176.5. So I think there's going to be a lot of points. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for both of these star players, and neither of which is on the Olympic squad. So we don't have any of those same concerns. I know we put in a bet on Alyssa Thomas to get a triple double in whatever it was, Tuesday night's game, and there was no reports in advance. There was nothing. She was not on the injury report. Nothing. But then there was commentary saying like after the game, because she played 23 minutes, sat basically with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, and then didn't play for the rest of the game in what was a relatively close game against the New York Liberty, who were resting Breanna Stewart, and they said they were resting her because she's going to be in the Olympics. She's playing a lot more basketball, and they were like, you know what, like let's give her some rest here. And this was a game that Connecticut probably could have won. They were in this game, they were involved in this game. It was a contested game, and then they just sat her. So I think it's kind of bad optics for the W in a game where it's two of your premier teams in the league in terms of standings, in terms of their ability to contend for a title, and then you have a player who I don't even think it was her choice really, but where they're kind of saying in her press conference afterwards, like, well, like we're trying to play the long game with some rest, blah blah blah. Like I recognize that you're on the Olympic team, but like I don't understand why you're not playing. I don't know why you even played then. It's like you played to a point where it's like, all right, like we're in contention to win this game, and then you just sit. Like it just seems I think it's bad. I think it's bad optics. I think that it's bad for betting, especially. Obviously, like maybe I'm a little biased because I had a bet on her. I don't think the triple double was going to hit either way, based on the fact that she only had 5 assists when she did check out midway through the third. But at the same time, it's like if that's the game plan going in, there's sometimes there's some ability to say like, all right, like we know that this guy's getting load managed, we know that this person is coming off an injury or whatever, but there was never really any question of what her status was for the game. And then all of a sudden, midway through the third quarter, after playing 23 minutes, there's like, nope, you're done, that's it, we're gonna play the long game. When you would think that the long game would be trying to, after you had already played 23 minutes, to try to win that game against a team that you're jockeying for position with in the standings. So interesting choices, very just kind of odd to do, kind of odd to say the least. So that's my little rant for the Alyssa Thomas play and how the Connecticut Sun handled that. But do appreciate my guy Brendan Glasheen giving us the scoop after he got off the broadcast, because he said they didn't know, nobody else was told, and it was just something that they found out after the game that was what had been going on. So very, very interesting. But I wanted to turn to the NBA Summer League. Obviously, like you guys see, like I like to bet the Summer League. I think it's fun. I think there's a lot of interesting players. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And when I am like looking at what some of the stats are and what some of the teams do, Summer League is just so fascinating because the market is not like, it's not like a real playoffs. Like you have all these teams playing, and only 4 teams make the semifinals. So only 4 teams can win the title after you get through your initial 4 games. And there's a couple ways that that's determined. Generally, if there's a one-way tie or like a two-way tie with like 2 different teams, obviously they look at head-to-head record first, and then they go to point differential after that. The problem is that because there's only 4 games, you don't usually end up in a situation where it's only 2 teams. So you generally wind up to being in a situation where it's looked at as overall point differential. However, when you consider that, right, if these teams play each other like head to head, if you lose that matchup, like you're probably out because there's just not enough spaces, right? So like this season, at this point, we have the Grizzlies, the Heat, the Magic, the Raptors, the Warriors, the Clippers, the Hornets, and the Spurs. So there's 8 teams right now that are currently 2-0, and they're undefeated. Both the Clippers and the Spurs are playing at the time of this recording. The score in those games right now, the Clippers are up 12 over the Bucks in about halftime, and the Spurs are up 3 with about 3 minutes to go in the second quarter. So those teams could kind of drop out of this. Given that, right, any of the teams that are 2-0 should make like at this, or really any of the teams that are 4-0 should be able to make it through to the next round. And the reason I say that is we have two matchups currently, or there's one matchup currently where both of the teams are undefeated. And that's coming up on Wednesday. And there's one more on Friday where both of the undefeated teams are going to play each other. So we have the Grizzlies and the Magic facing off against each other. And then we have the Raptors and the Heat facing off against each other. This, I think, is particularly important, though, because all four of those teams are top 4 in point differential. The Grizzlies are plus 20, the Heat are plus 17, Magic are plus 16, the Raptors are plus 14. So in the event that any of those teams drops out, depending on what the margin is, right? Like if the Grizzlies only lose by, say, 1 point, they still are going to have a plus 19 point differential, even though they, are a 2-1 team. And when you consider that, it means that a lot of these other 2-1 teams are going to struggle because just based on kind of the way the schedule is. So to me, I think that some of these teams that are in the top are going to have a little bit of value, but then I also think that like some of these teams that are just off of that, like the Warriors have a little bit of value, the Clippers have some value, but also a team like the Hornets has a ton of value. So the Hornets have an interesting schedule. They play the Celtics, who are 1-1, and they also play the Blazers, who have been pretty bad throughout the course of the summer league. The Blazers they're 2-1, but they have a minus 0.7 point differential. So they're not really a team that you're super concerned about in terms of how they're contending, right? So I think that there's some room to jockey around here with the Grizzlies and the Magic and the Raptors and the Heat. I think that they can kind of hang around in there. So if one of those teams, well, obviously one of these teams is going to lose, but after those games, you can kind of look and see how the standings are. And there might be an opportunity to buy in on one of those teams to win the summer league just because of the fact that they dropped one game. But because their point differential is so high, especially the Grizzlies and the Heat, for example, I think that those would be two teams that I would be very interested in, like kind of buying into, because the Heat, this game against the Raptors you couldn't really buy in there because the game's too late, right? But the Heat play the Mavs, who have not necessarily been a great team throughout this preseason or so far. They are 0-2, minus 10.5 point differential. So for me, if I'm looking to bet Miami, I think I might try to buy Miami now. If I'm looking to bet either the Grizzlies or the Magic, I might wait until after this game on Wednesday and then say like, okay, let me kind of assess the lay of the land here. There might be an opportunity, depending on what the score is, to and how much they lost by, to buy in, because we're going to see them reflected as 2-1, but the best 2-1 teams in terms of point differential are the Rockets and the Timberwolves. The Rockets are plus 7.7. The Timberwolves are plus 5.3. And then you have the Sixers at plus 4.4. The reason I'm bringing those two teams up, though, is because the Rockets and the Wolves play each other. So the two best teams that are 2-1 play each other. And if Memphis, Miami, Orlando, or Toronto, or honestly even Golden State's plus 13.5. If one of those teams slips to 3-1, for example, they could still have an opportunity to get in there just based on the fact that like these other good 2-1 teams have to play each other. So I think that there's a little bit of opportunity to maybe buy in to one of those markets at this point in time. I think that Miami is a good bet now. I think the last that I saw them listed, they were at least 5-1, maybe 6-1. I would be highly interested in Miami. I think the Raptors are also good. The Raptors play the Jazz, who are 1-1, and then they play the Heat later. So you kind of have an opportunity. I think that Miami should 100% beat Dallas. It depends a little bit on who plays. Jaime Jaquez has played a lot, and that's been really helpful for them. Khalil Ware has also played a ton of minutes. So got to kind of keep an eye on who they're going to have in their rotations, but it seems like Jaquez, maybe he's going to play. He's played 2 games so far through the Vegas Summer League. If he's continuing to play, they should really be able to take care of teams. But even if he doesn't play, Dallas has been so bad that it's still a game that Miami can probably win with some of their other talent. So I would be interested in buying into Miami, especially like I guess you could wait until they announce the starters for that game. And that game is taking place at, let's get the time for you guys. That game is taking place at 3:00 on Wednesday. So see if Hawkes is playing, see if Ware is playing. If those dudes are playing, I'd highly recommend betting not really that game. I would be recommending to bet Miami to win the summer league. I think that you're going to get a good number. The spread here is -4.5 for Miami, so not super interested in that, but I do think it's a good opportunity. If they sit, then I think that you might have an opportunity to bet on a team like the Raptors. The Raptors are a 2-1 team here, or no, they're a 3-0, they're 2-0 team trying to avoid being a 2-1 team. They're playing the Jazz, who I think are a decent summer league team. Raptors are just a little bit better. I kind of like them at -1.5, -125 in this game on Wednesday. And I would be looking for them. Like Grady Dick has been incredible so far for them throughout this summer league. They haven't really made any indications that he's not going to continue to play. So I do think that there's some opportunity there. Summer league is just so many moving parts. And I think that the way you kind of have to look at it, and it's very difficult from like a prop betting perspective, right? Because these guys, like they're getting a ton of opportunity, but they're not, number one, they're not the most efficient just because of the stage of their careers that they're in. And then number two, when some of the guys that they're playing with are also just like, they're not going to make an NBA roster, right? So, like I was watching the Chicago Bulls today, right? And one of the things that I noticed when I was watching the Bulls was like Modest Buzelis is awesome. I think he's been great so far through the summer league, and he scored 18 points, had a pretty solid game. And the thing that I noticed is like he was making plays, and then some of his teammates were like just missing him. He's wide open, and they're like driving in to take contested layups. Not like the best form for like team basketball. And it's not super surprising though when you think about it, because I've said this before with like summer league, the guards obviously have the ball in their hands. They can dictate, the pace. They can dictate who's getting the ball, and that's just the way that these games are run. Like they're not super organized, right? And because of that, a lot of these guys are like, well, I have to score. Like that's the way that I'm going to get minutes. Like that's the way that I'm going to maybe be able to make the team. If I can drop like a 30-point game, somebody's going to sign me. That's going to be my ticket. But when you look at it, actually, a lot of the ways that the scouts kind of take an eye at it and take a look at everything is they're like, well, we care a little bit more about turnovers. We care about assists. We care about steals, blocks. Like we care about those decisions that are being made. Not so much that you can just score. Obviously the scoring is important, but like those other stats, like the usage stats, or so to speak, or like the mental IQ, the basketball IQ stats, those are the ones that the teams are looking for. So you can't expect them to necessarily make good decisions all the time with the basketball, or make like prudent decisions. And I think that that's super important to kind of remember here. And these guys that like Buzelis, he's not somebody that is taking the ball up the court. He's 6'10". He's forward. Like that's not what he's doing. Right. And I think that it makes it a little bit more difficult because there can be possessions or stretches of possessions where he just doesn't get the ball because they're not trying to get him the ball. And it definitely makes it a little bit more difficult. And then you have other guys that kind of know this, and they're in a scoring position, like Reed Sheppard, for example. Reed Sheppard of the Houston Rockets. So Sheppard has been really interesting because Sheppard has, he scored pretty well in a couple of these games, but he's also gotten to points where it's like, oh, like I don't need to score. I'm just going to dish or I'm going to do this. Right. And he's not necessarily looking at the basket. And I think that's to showcase that he can do more than one thing, because the coaches are probably saying to him like, hey, like we want to see a little bit of this from you. Can you show us this? Like what else can you bring to the table? And it affects their ceiling in some of the props. So like, yeah, Reed Shepherd could probably go out there and drop 30 if he wanted to, but then he's not going to have really like any assists, maybe not as many rebounds, etc. Whereas if he's going to these games, he's like, well, I can put up like 18, 5 and 5, then the Rockets are looking at that and saying like, all right, like we can use this, like we can inject this into a roster, we can inject this into a rotation, and he's a useful player. So those are just a couple of things that I noticed with Summer League. I do think that Summer League is a lot of fun to watch. I think that I've been trying to do some player props. I think we're about even on them. They're just, it's nothing too crazy at this point, but I do think that it's fun. Obviously it gives us a little bit of action here. I know a lot of people prefer to just bet on basketball generally than, maybe some of the all-star games, the home run derby or anything like that. But that's kind of the way that I try to approach it. And from a futures perspective, though, we're not doing too bad. A couple of the angles that we really did like were, we were talking about it, and before the Summer League, like the Jazz, like the Grizzlies, like the Thunder, like the Wizards a little bit. The Grizzlies are still in there. Like I said, the Grizzlies have the number 1 point differential. We got them at 9-1. The Utah Jazz are still involved here, and we got them at as high as 18-1. The Wizards and the Thunder kind of dead, but that's okay. That's to be expected. Like you're not going to be able to keep all these players, all these bets, all of these angles kind of alive. And we know that going in. It's a little bit of it's not I don't want to call it a guessing game, but there is like a little bit of a strategy in terms of like who we're picking, how we're picking them. And we want some longer odds, and we wanted to be able to supplement them or get into positions where, maybe now we can hedge. Maybe now we can find something else. So for Miami, I was a little surprised that Hawkins has played this long. And, that's why I was kind of off of them. I know Matt Moore, he liked the Orlando Magic. They're right in there. And they're in a good position now where they can knock off one of the best teams in the Summer League with the Memphis Grizzlies. So it's going to be pretty exciting. And I think these are games that I think you want to watch, not so much because they're like the basketball quality is interesting, but I think that you can learn a little bit about what these guys like to do, how they like to get to the basket, what kind of player are they going to be? And like a guy that has struggled, obviously, well, like we know Bronny struggled, 55th pick in the draft, like it is what it is, right? Alex Sarr had a terrible game today. He was like 0 for 15 from the field, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, just not a good game. But it's like, okay. And I think the thing that's interesting about this, right? He still took 15 shots. So I think it's important to see that in a player like him. He's number 2 pick in the draft. He's going to a Washington Wizards team that he should realistically get plenty of run for. And he should be able to play. He should be able to have like plenty of opportunity, right? And what I think is interesting about it is that he didn't stop shooting the basketball. And I think that it's very important that he didn't get gun shy. He wasn't dissuaded from shooting the basketball. He didn't lose that aggressiveness. And having that saying like, well, I'm going to make the next shot. Like I'm going to make it. I'm not going to change the way that I'm playing because I'm in a little bit of a cold streak. For a guy that's 19 years old, playing in some of his first, NBA like adjacent games, right? I think it's important that he maintains that mentality. Obviously, it's Summer League, so like winning and losing doesn't totally matter, and it does a little bit more during the regular season, obviously. And I say a little bit more because we're talking about the Wizards, but when you look at this, you're like, all right, well, I know that if he gets off to a cold start, like I'm not dead if I bet a points prop here because he's going to continue to put up shots. He's going to continue to get looks. And I think that's super, super important. So there are things that you can learn like that. And then you can also learn some things like Reed Shepherd has been dynamic in terms of his steals, his court vision, with his assists. He can score from everywhere on the floor. He was doing a little bit of like the Nashian type of move where he would dribble around the paint, not give up his dribble, drive baseline, go up the baseline. So I think that was a little bit interesting because you see that development from a player, and you're like, okay, like I could see him playing real minutes for a Rockets team that does actually have like a pretty tough backcourt to kind of get into. So I think that this is a really interesting spot. And I like some of the things that I'm seeing from guys like Zach Edey. I think Edey has looked awesome so far throughout the preseason. He obviously hasn't played the past couple of games. I don't think he hasn't needed to. He showed because Memphis played more summer league games because they played, in I think it was in Utah, right? And because they did that, he was able to get some more minutes. He was able to get out there. He was able to play a little bit more. And I thought that was super, super important. So I do like that Memphis Grizzlies over in terms of their win total. It's 45.5. I gave that out on buckets. I think it's still there. I don't mind it at 46.5. I think that you should honestly bet them to win the division at like 3-1. I would be looking for 50 plus wins, 55 plus wins, maybe even a little bit of the 1 seed in the West. I think Memphis is going to be really good. And if you want to listen to more of that, you can tune into Buckets. I gave out like a full analysis of why I really like that team this year and what their ceiling is. So it's a great opportunity, I think, for the Memphis Grizzlies to have a bounce back year. Now, I want to just talk to you a little bit about our plans for the Olympics. So I'm going to be covering pretty much like every game between myself, Brian Fonseca. We're going to be doing it at the Action Network. I still will be having, I know that we're going to be doing buckets a decent amount. I'm still going to be releasing this podcast, obviously, as well to cover some of the games in between. I don't formally have a ton of bets right now on it. I do think that there's probably a little bit of value on Serbia to win. They're 18-1 right now. And or at least one of the markets that I've seen them at, they're 18-1. Part of, I think, the problem is that they're in the group with the United States, which basically means like you're going to lose a game. Like you're probably going to lose to the United States. But at the same time, it also means that you're getting the United States early, which is probably the best time to get the United States because maybe you can, if you can beat them, the rest of the group, they should be able to handle. But also, if you can beat them, that means that you're probably not going to wind up facing them for a bit throughout the tournament, the rest of the tournament, like when you get to the medal rounds. So I think that is like an interesting angle, an interesting way to look at it. They have Jokic. They have they have a pretty top-notch team that has given the United States difficulty over the past couple of years, even without Jokic. So Jokic just kind of presents a very interesting challenge for the United States. Obviously, the United States has Joel Embiid. They have Anthony Davis. They have Bam Adebayo. You can maybe throw multiple of those guys at Jokic, but we have seen that not work out so well when you double team him. Obviously, Embiid, Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, some of the best defensive players in the NBA, period, let alone at the center position. However, that then changes some of the spacing. It changes some of the rotations that the United States can throw at them. So it's a particularly interesting scenario. But I think that there's probably a little bit of value on Serbia at 18-1. I'd probably look at them to medal. I also like France. I think that France is going to be really good because when you think about the fact that they have Wemby and they have Rudy Gobert, that pairing I think should be very good throughout this type of format because of the fact that like there is no defensive 3 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever. There's no defensive, like there's no defensive violations. You can just camp out at the rim. It's fine. You can do that the whole game and there's no problem with that. And the goaltending rules are a little bit different too. So I think that having that kind of length, having that kind of size could prove to be difficult for some of these other teams. Granted, the United States should be able to line up with them from a size perspective and even from an athleticism perspective. But the United States guards would be much better than the French guards who, like one of their main players is Evan Fournier, for example. And he's somebody that the United States would absolutely torch on the perimeter. So obviously, there's a couple different moving parts here. We're going to be diving in. We're going to be giving you best bets, and we'll have that to you sometime next week. And, we'll get the written content out as well. But the Olympics are going to be fun. I think this is going to be one of the better Olympics in terms of like star talent across the board. And it's going to be a great opportunity to watch some players in different settings and to see like how they can play when they are given a bigger role, because sometimes that's important to remember when guys get hurt and we see players take on enhanced roles or greater roles. And you can say like, oh, I remember watching him in the Olympics, and he, when he was the number one option, or he was even the number two option, he got like 30 minutes. He was taking a ton of more shots, and this is the way that he was able to convert. So international game, obviously a little bit different than the American game, than the NBA. However, there are things that we can learn. There are some things that we can transfer back and forth, and we're going to be getting you all of that in terms of our best bets and all of our analysis. As for pods and recs, I got a couple. Number one, unsubscribe yourself to emails. I had so many emails that I was just unsubscribing myself. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I just kept getting emails that I was just deleting. Like, instantly, I'd open my phone, I had a million emails. I was like, I gotta get out of this. So unsubscribe yourself to some emails. I think that that's kind of important to do. Number two, I would say get some sun. It's a nice time of the year. I know that it's hot. But when you get some sun, maybe throw some sunscreen on. I know that, skin cancer, obviously a concern. You want to be able to survive. You don't want to get melanoma. So we're anti-melanoma at the Cash That podcast. So try to get some sun, put on some sunscreen. You'll still get plenty of color if that's the way that you want to go about it. So do that, get outside. And what else? Oh, get yourself some Konas. I love a good Kona beer. I like Big Wave. It's probably my favorite like all year long beer. I like that beer a lot. If I had to have a beer in my fridge, it's going to be a Kona Big Wave. So highly recommend it. And, keep riding the wave. It's the summer. There's not as much to bet on, but we're doing the best that we can to try to maintain sharp angles while still being a little bit entertaining here. Not all of these markets are ones that are widely available, and I try to be considerate of that, and I try to make sure that you guys can get in on them. I know that we move some lines, and it is hard to tail some stuff sometimes, so don't feel bad like if you missed anything. I'm not betting these lines the same way that I would bet during the NBA regular season, so the margins are a little bit thinner, but don't feel like you have to chase something just because we put it out there. It's like, man, that moved a lot. It's like, it's all right. It happens. And sometimes you can get it the next time, because when we move a line and it's minus 110, it goes like minus 130, minus 140. It's not really the same bet anymore. And it's something that you absolutely need to remember. And it's okay, because sometimes the best bet that you can make is not betting something. So I want you guys to remember that. Keep riding that Kona Big Wave, get some sun, and let's continue to cash that.